Today's episode is super inspiring from both a business and entrepreneurial standpoint and the ability to make massive social impact through that medium, and also very enlightening in terms of help for those who struggle with high blood sugar, all the way from prediabetes to type 2 diabetes. My guest is Sami Inkinen. He's the CEO and co-founder of Virta Health. I've been Virta, if you've been in the keto world, you've probably heard of Virta Health. Doctors Jeff Fullick and Stephen Finney, they have done a ton of research in that field. So they're part of Virta Health. And yeah, they are pioneers in transforming metabolic health through personalized nutrition and one-on-one coaching, which I really learned about how they're doing that and working with both employers and insurance companies. And in this episode, I was really happy to hear what Sami's been able to help out with in terms of making help more accessible for people, reversing type 2 diabetes. Yes, we can reverse it. You don't have to be on insulin forever, So yeah, please take a listen, find out what they're offering. I love Sami's personal story too. So I asked him to share that, this insanely fit, high performing athlete who found out he was on the path to type 2 diabetes and insulin resistant, which caused him to come out of his he was hoping to retire a little bit from entrepreneurship, but he really felt like he had to help with this. One thing about him is he was the co-founder of Trulia, the real estate marketplace. If you're familiar with that, sold that to Zillow, was ready to kind of chill. And then this whole thing happened and he's like, okay, I got to help. So super grateful that he has brought his business skills to the holistic medicine table, because it's really amazing what Virta Health is doing. If you want to visit their website, it's just Virta. So it's VIRTA health.com. And you can also follow them on social media. They share a lot of great information there as well. So check them out. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoy. Here is Sami Inkinen. Okay, so Sami, it's super nice to get to meet you and talk a little bit before we started recording, because I'm definitely familiar with Virta Health. And probably most people who have gone through a big keto phase of their life have, if they haven't heard of, Dr. Finney and Dr. Volek directly, they've definitely been the receivers of some of their research and work. I always appreciate seeing them at conferences and seeing what they're up to. They've done some of the most important research work in the ketogenic diet field and deeper metabolic health. So super appreciate you guys. And, you're the business leader over there at Virta, and just took that on in 2020, you said, right? And I wanted to hear how you got here, because your story is very powerful.
Well, thank you so much, Tara, for having me here. And yes, I'm a co-founder and CEO of Virta Health. And actually, we started working on the concept already 2014. So that's,
oh, wow. Okay.
10 years and
Got it.
really 9 years, I would say, full time. But yeah, maybe just take a couple of steps back and answer your question. Well, first of all, what we're trying to do at Virta, and then I'll share how I ended up there myself. The big picture for us is, I like to say, we're solving the health epidemic of our generation, which sadly is type 2 diabetes and obesity. Or we label as type 2 diabetes and obesity, but more broadly, it's poor metabolic health. And public usually knows it as type 2 diabetes and obesity. And as I'm sure you and your audience very well knows, sadly, we've been treating these diseases for the last, 3 decades by addressing symptoms, mainly with medications, as opposed to addressing the underlying driver of type 2 diabetes and obesity. And so what we are trying to do at Virta is to fundamentally reverse both type 2 diabetes and obesity through nutrition. And that's kind of what we've been doing for the last decade. And our publicly stated mission is reverse type 2 diabetes in 100 million people. And under the hood, yes, it's individualized nutrition, and carbohydrate restriction plays a key part. But then the other element is we deliver the entire treatment virtually and use technology, software, and then medical providers as well, and our coaches to take care of our patients. And I emphasize medical providers because a lot of the patients we treat have type 2 diabetes and might already be on insulin. So we have to be able to safely de-prescribe and titrate them off of the medications. So that's kind of the broad picture on what we are trying to do at Virta Health. But if you don't mind, I'll share kind of how I ended up here, because It was sort of an accidental stumble that got me here and got me interested in this space. So very, very briefly, my background, I grew up in Finland, a physicist by training, started my career in a nuclear power plant in Finland, like way back when. So
Mm.
nothing to do with diabetes, obesity, or healthcare. Um, then came to America 2003. So I've been here now for about 21 years. And my professional tool actually has been software. So the hammer in my back pocket has always been tech. And so right after coming to America, I started a company called Trulia, this online real estate marketplace, Trulia, which then almost a decade later went public and then now merged with Zillow Group 2014. So that was kind of my background. So nothing to do with healthcare, nothing to do with, trying to address diabetes and obesity. And at the time when Zillow acquired Trulia 2014, I thought, wow, I've been an entrepreneur for 14 years nonstop. It's phenomenal, but it's also kind of like you don't have other life. And I
Yeah.
thought, I'm done for the time being. But what happened to me was, despite the fact that throughout those Trulia years, I was doing a lot of triathlons. I mentioned you live in Hawaii. I did the Hawaii Ironman World Championship 7 times. I ended up winning world championships in my age group in triathlons. I was very fit, obviously. Despite all that, I discovered that I was pre-diabetic myself and on my way to obviously developing type 2 diabetes. And, to me, especially as a physicist, I was like, no
What?
compute, no compute. This just doesn't make any freaking sense.
Right.
And it was through that process and frustration and quite frankly anger, I met Dr. Stephen Finney and Dr. Jeff Volek and their research and got to know them and understood that obviously I was wrong. It's not just how much you eat or staying lean, it's what you eat. And metabolic disease, diabetes, and obesity is a disease. It's not like you just choose or lack of willpower. And then secondly, discovered that what you eat can also potentially reverse obesity and type 2 diabetes without, willpower and massive personal
Mm.
efforts. And I said, we probably don't have to help millions of people like me, but there's millions or hundreds of millions of people who are struggling from obesity and type 2 diabetes who don't know any better.
Mhm.
And maybe we should start a company and try to go and help people truly suffering from type 2 diabetes and obesity. And that kind of pulled me in and I said, let's go. That was
Nice.
2014. And here we are about 10 years later,
Well,
trying to
thank you.
reverse diabetes.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying what you guys are up to, and thank you for coming out of your 6-month retirement. You thought you're you thought you were done. It's really appreciated, because there's so many of us in the holistic health world that are not trained in business, and it's like I want to help people get healthy. So you get trained in all of the actual health aspects of it. But we really need people who are experienced
Mhm,
in business to be able to come in and be able to reach more broadly,
mhm.
especially with something like this that is by and far, I mean, if you want to lump obesity and type 2 diabetes together, definitely up there and count on your fingers, the top issues that we're facing in health today. And thank you for sharing your personal experience because that awareness, I mean, it's such an extreme example. We always hear like, oh no, you can be thin and healthy looking and still be pre-diabetic. But to have that image, it's like you're like winning the world
Yeah,
championship for
yeah.
triathlons for your age division, like that level of fit you can
Mm.
still be pre-diabetic. That picture is just really needed because there's a lot of people that they don't even check, most people
Yeah,
just have no idea what their blood sugar is like at all. So thank you for opening up that, it's like, okay, if you're obese, like definitely look, but hey, even if you're winning world championship Ironmans, you also need to look.
100%.
Okay, so awesome that, wherever your life path took you, that you stumbled across two of the, I'm sure you sought out the best, right? And you really did, they're Dr. Volek and Dr. Finney are top of the keto world, the metabolic function world, definitely really appreciate them. I'm curious what you learned and what others might learn about what is at the root of this that they might not be aware of, right? So whether you're pre-diabetic or you already have type 2 diabetes, what kind of things do people need to be aware of from your angle that you're seeing people just aren't thinking about?
Yeah, yeah. Okay. First of all, I have to tread lightly and carefully here for two main reasons. One is, I do have two master's degrees, but I'm not a medical doctor, and
Yeah.
I don't play one on the internet. So I'll try to be very careful, like what kind of clinical statements I make. And then the second reason is, in my role as founder and CEO of Virta, we try to be very evidence-based, and we've published dozen
Yeah.
peer-reviewed papers on the Virta and run a 5-year prospective clinical trial. So I try to be very sort of evidence-based in whatever I say here. But I think, well, first of all, people who are sort of might have poor metabolic health. So I think generally it's very helpful to do annual physicals and blood tests and see kind of what's happening there, obviously. And there's the typical metabolic health panel, whether that's blood sugar A1C or your lipid panel, triglycerides and inflammation, that are usually for people who are developing metabolic disease, insulin resistance, may not initially feel much, and maybe you've gained a few extra pounds and so forth. So you might be able to see from your sort of annual blood test that if you're headed to the right or the wrong direction. So this just kind of a general point there. Then in terms of what we've learned and what we've seen among our patients, and now we have hundreds of thousands of patient years of data and experience treating
Nice.
patients. I think a couple of things, and this is sort of in no particular order. I'd say number one is this misconception, particularly by fit people and people living on the coast and maybe on the island of Hawaii, is some people is that it truly is not a personal choice. So people who are metabolically unhealthy, or let's say massively obese or even morbidly obese, I haven't yet met a single patient we've treated who knowingly have decided to develop type 2 diabetes or become obese. Like there's this misconception by people who are lean or fit or healthy or whatever, that it's you're lazy, it's your personal choice, you just don't have the kind of the grit to take care of yourself. That is complete bullshit. Like
Nice.
literally, there's not a single person who has that. In fact, practically all of the patients that we've treated, when they come in, they've tried like 5 to 15 diets. And, usually they work for 3 months on the wedding photo or whatever, and then willpower runs out, and they've just struggled. So I'd say that's one thing that's a huge misconception, that we think of it as like, oh, whatever you put into your mouth is a personal choice. It's to some extent it is, but then when you're metabolically unhealthy, you're craving, your hunger, like you just cannot. So I'd say that's one thing. The second thing is that as we start treating patients and changing their nutrition, it's usually like a miraculous experience to our patients that they can quickly switch their metabolism from, say, burning sugar to burning fat to feeling satisfied, not having hunger, not having cravings. People cannot believe what's possible nutritionally. And now we have these GLP-1 drugs like Ozempic, Wegovy, and so forth. I hear the same stories from people who take these drugs, saying, I can't believe this. I'm not hungry. I can't believe I was a whatever sugarholic, and now I'm not craving, the
Who
gummy
am
bears
I?
or whatever cookies. And I'm like, that's awesome. Like clearly something changed. But we can achieve the same results nutritionally. So that's a sort of a second thing. And it is mind-blowing to most of our patients. And then usually that's followed by almost like a frustration and anger, especially if it's someone who's lived with type 2 diabetes for, say, 20 years, and, they change the way they feel about food. They start losing weight, and within like 30 days, we get them off of insulin, and they go like, this is ridiculous. Why did I suffer 20 years? I was 80 pounds overweight. I couldn't even play with my kids or grandkids. And you guys fixed me in like 45 days. Why didn't anyone tell? So that's kind of the second thing. And then I'll mention third one, and then I'll pause is from a behavior change and nutritional perspective, what it takes to restore your metabolic health, kind of lose the initial excess weight and get to, like, say, from sickness to health, what it takes to do that is different from what it takes to then maintain that for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, from a behavior, from a
Yeah.
everything perspective. And even like what we do with our patients is very different. The first 3 to 12 months, depending on how sick someone is coming in, the way we help them is very different from kind of like, how do we give them the skills and tools to succeed and maintain that for, for the rest of the life, hopefully.
Those are so many gems. Let's work into those a little bit. Thank you. Okay, first of all, thank you for the empathy. I always think when I hear these kind of really rough mindsets of like, oh, you just don't have enough willpower and you're just lazy and all this stuff. And you can, as a coach, as someone who does this every day, it's like you can clearly see that this person has a lot of metabolic dysfunction. And I always just want to see, I just want to like take that judgmental person and, bless their hearts. And I just want to like drop them into that other person's body and be like, okay, watch you do it. Let me see you do it.
Mhm.
Oh, wow. The sugar cravings are out of control because you aren't aware of how your blood sugar is spiking. You aren't aware of how neurotransmitters get boosted by
Mhm.
sugars, and you aren't aware of how low your dopamine drops on type 2 diabetes.
Mhm.
And so you literally are like, your body's trying not to die and also just have the brain power to go on with life. Like, I'm like, I just like to drop you in their physiology for a minute and see how you do,
Yeah.
So, so thanks for that. And then, in terms of, what was the second one you were saying?
Oh, the sort of unbelievable rapid changes that people are like, how
Yes,
did this happen?
yes.
I've been struggling for 30 years and I can't believe, now I have a
Yeah.
natural, normal relationship with food. I'm losing weight. I'm getting off medications. This is insane. What happened? Miracle.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's totally been my experience too. And I would say, to just kind of put it plainly, like the more obese a client I have, right, the more metabolic dysfunction they've experienced, like the more dramatic that
Mhm.
is, right? It's like kind of
Yes.
when I get somebody who's over 300
Yeah.
pounds, pushing 400 pounds, like they're like, who am I? Like,
Mhm. Mhm.
how am I not craving stuff? Like, what? And it's to see that kind of confidence brew in them from like simple understanding of how the body works,
Mhm.
it's just such a beautiful thing to see. And I'd say it's probably my favorite
Yeah.
thing about
Yeah.
bringing someone through keto is like kind of waiting for it. I'm like waiting for the text, or waiting for the check-in call. How's it going? They're like, so good. I'm like,
Mhm.
yeah. So I love that. And let's see, your third one.
Is
Now,
what it takes to have the initial changes is kind of a different
okay.
thing from sustaining and succeeding for life, which is obviously essential
Yeah. Thank you.
for the
I guess I need
benefits.
to go through another keto phase because you're recalling all those way quicker than me. Okay, yeah, let's dive into that a little bit. And I'd like to kind of discuss a little bit like what it is that you guys are, doing with people, like what the experience is for people if they're coming to Verta, who do you work with? Is it mostly people who already have type 2?
Mhm.
Is it, like, so let's kind of go into the experience of working with you guys. Like, what is that journey like and who might benefit the most from that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first, in terms of just how do the mechanics of the even the business work, because it relates to who we take in. Primarily, our model is such that we work with payers, that is self-insured employers, anything from UPS, Papa
Nice.
John's, US Foods, United
Awesome.
Airlines, like
Mm,
500 or so large employers in America, as well as health plans like your Blue Cross Blue Shield of Hawaii, Blue Shield of
mm,
California, Humana, some government organizations like the Veterans Administration, even state employee groups. So they are
wow.
our clients. So from a
Yes.
business perspective, we go to them and say, or ask, how's type 2 diabetes and obesity? Is it very expensive for you? Are your members and employees suffering? And of course, everybody raises hand. By the way, I say everybody because this is insane. More than 60% of American adults are either type 2 diabetes,
Wow.
obesity, overweight. It's just like,
All
so
right.
anyway, so it's not an
Yeah.
exception that you suffer from poor metabolic health. the great majority of American adults are explicitly metabolically unhealthy. So, but in any case, so these payers cover the cost of Virta. And for individual members or employees who are then eligible through their payer, again, employer or the health plan, it's free. So our treatment is completely free. Now,
Wow.
if your employer health plan doesn't cover you, like, that sounds awesome. I want that benefit. You can come to our website, virta.com, and sign up with your credit card and whatnot. So we do take cash pay patients, but back to your earlier comment, it's important to have businesses try to scale and have massive impact. Our primary way of trying to impact and help millions of people is to make this type of a treatment free for anyone in America living with type 2 diabetes or obesity through this kind of a business model where kind of everybody wins. The end user wins, and then the payer makes money in the process, which by the way is rare in US healthcare, where usually it's here's a miracle treatment, it's very expensive, extends your I don't know cancer patient life by a year, and it's $1 million. And then there's this debate, should we cover or not? But in the case of eliminating type 2 diabetes, it's kind of beautiful because the payer makes money while making someone healthy. So what is there not to like? That's what I think about it. So anyway, so that's the model. So in terms of how what's the experience and who is eligible, the eligibility is always decided by the payer, but generally we offer our treatment to two types of folks. It's either someone with diagnosed type 2 diabetes or obesity. And increasingly, payers, employers, and health plans are covering the obesity treatment as well. When we originally started, it was happening less because there was less interest in investing into weight loss and obesity treatment. Now the interest has gone through the roof, and you might guess the reason, and the reason is the GLP-1 drugs. Because if the payer doesn't do the first thing, which is nutrition, they're on the hook for massive cost of these GLP-1 drugs. So generally, when we work with payer, it's both type 2 diabetes and obesity. So that means, typically more than 50% of their member base or employee base gets free access to Virta. So so that's kind of who and how. And then in terms of the treatment, I'll give you the very fast version, and then we can dive into any specifics. But one, we reach out to the eligibles. That could be an email, or we send direct mail, done that in Hawaii, and say, hey, your health plan is making this treatment available for you for free. If you want to take advantage of it, just go to virtahealth.com and sign up. So you come to our website, which is the door to our clinic, so to speak, online. You give your health history. And then after that, once we have the data, you have a call with a live Virta employee, an intake call where we kind of get a little bit of your health history and see if you're willing and ready to embark on this journey. Then after that, we get your lab results. Either if they are sort of recent, we might be able to get it digitally from a health exchange, or you go to like LabCorp book Quest that we get your metabolic panel. And then you have your first visit with one of our doctors, medical doctors. So that's kind of an intake call where we make the final plan and make sure you're healthy, and if there's any specific issues we need to deal with. And of course you might wonder, like, why do you need to meet a doctor if we just use nutrition? But again, on average, most of our patients we treat, let's be honest, there's 3-4 chronic conditions as part of the bundle. They might be on 7 drugs, 3 diabetes drugs, hypertension drug, antidepressant, this and that. So we are medically liable, and we want to make sure we deliver phenomenally safe care. So we need to know all that stuff before we start doing anything with you. So then after that, we'll send you a Virta starter kit to your home, where we have remote monitoring tools so we can track your blood sugar, your blood ketones, your weight, if you're on hypertensive medications, your blood pressure. So we get all that data remotely, through the cloud or through the app to our system. So you get that starter kit, and then we assign you a one-on-one coach. So although everything's sort of software and technology empowered, there's always human in the loop on our side. So you get a dedicated coach who kind of follows your journey forever. So it's usually becomes a very tight personal relationship. And these are our full-time employees. We don't, I don't know, for better or worse, like if somebody is a coach and wants to join, then you kind of have to become a Virta employee to be part of it.
Mhm.
And then this coach becomes your kind of primary point of contact. And then the treatment starts. And again, I'd say 90% of our treatment is nutrition, but highly individualized. Yes, carbohydrate restriction plays a key part because biologically, if you're insulin resistant, there's really, at least we haven't found another way, like increasing your carbs isn't going to do good. So it's the opposite. But beyond that, it's highly individualized. We work with Native American tribes. We work with truck drivers. We work with blue collar workers working for bank.
Mhm.
Every possible, age, sex, socioeconomic status, stay-home
Mhm.
moms, I don't know, shift worker dads, whatnot. So the individualization is basically to an n equals one, because you can't, if you are someone who drives a truck and only has access to food at highway stops, we can't tell them to go to Whole Foods,
Right.
buy ingredients and start cooking. On the other hand, if you're a stay-home mom, you take care of the kids and maybe the spouse or the partner, their recommendation nutritionally is very different. It may be recipes. So there's a
Mhm.
massive amount of
Nice.
individualization needed. And then we track biomarkers on a daily basis so we can really see how your body is reacting and using that data to respond and say, hey, maybe we need to reduce the protein amount, or maybe we should, whatever it is that we have to customize, we can be pretty objective based on the data that's coming back to us. So that's kind of broadly how it works. And then of course our providers, medical providers, make medication adjustments nearly daily basis initially, especially if you're type 2 diabetic with a bunch of drugs like insulin that have a high hypoglycemic risk. Um, but mostly it's the coach who's interfacing with the member
Mm.
as opposed to the medical doctor. So
Okay.
that's kind
Wow.
of a little bit of a description.
Uh, Small question before big
Mhm.
response. The data that you're collecting, are people wearing continuous glucose monitors? Are they pricking their fingers, or what kind of data are you collecting on people through the
Yeah, good question. By default, we don't supply CGMs or continuous
Yeah.
glucometers, simply because of the cost. And
Yeah.
in terms of our business model, we cover all the costs, and then obviously we deliver and promise to deliver certain savings to our clients. And what we found, in fact, it was published last week at the American Diabetes Association scientific sessions in Orlando, Florida. We published 10 new abstracts, and two of them were about CGMs.
Okay.
And the interesting thing that we found was there was no improvement in health outcomes among our patients, whether we use finger prick for blood glucose or CGM.
Okay.
Now, of course, there's more information in CGM, and
Yeah.
I'm sure I've used, and many of our
Yeah.
patients come in with them, and it's wonderful to see the
Right.
continuous curves. But in terms of actual results, it
Totally.
didn't drive any better results.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah.
And especially if you're working with people who already have type 2,
Mhm.
they're real used to it. So you don't even have to get them past
Mhm.
the whole finger prick fear
Yeah.
stage. Okay, wow. I mean, okay, so zooming out a little bit, like I'm so glad we did this interview today because I had no idea that you guys were doing that over at Verta. I seriously just want to cry listening to you
Okay.
say that because there's many of us from holistic, functional health coaches like me to functional medicine doctors, but it's so pricey. It's like it's
Mhm.
almost this like because it is like I don't work with insurance, like, I'm just like a small operation
Mhm.
over here. And so, people ask me that a lot. Like, do you take insurance? I'm like, "Oh no, like you think I'm much bigger than I
Yeah.
am, it's like very small business over here." But it breaks my heart sometimes because it's like it almost feels like there's like this like well, you only can get better if you have money, and
Mhm.
I sit with that sometimes. I'm like, "Ugh," I try to make programs and more affordable things, right? But to hear that not only are you guys working with employers and insurance companies, but like you're, reaching out, sending mailers, going to people saying, "Hey, you can do this," so it's accessible for anybody. I mean, my mom had type 2 diabetes and turned into dementia and
Yeah.
Alzheimer's and stroke. She passed away last November, and so I
Sorry to hear that.
watched
Yeah.
things like I watched that whole trajectory of like poor information. I remember as I became a coach talking about vitamin D and insulin sensitivity, and she's like, "Oh yeah, my vitamin D is always super low." And I'm like, "Oh, like what'd they tell you?" Like, I don't remember, and I'm just
Mhm.
that kind of, it's just take your insulin
Yeah.
and that's it.
Yeah.
And so to know that, like, people like my mom out there can get this level of help for
Yeah.
free is just amazing. Thank you for
Yeah.
coming out of your desire to chill and doing this. I can see why you did it. It's really important and
Yeah.
it's really cool. And just as somebody in this community, like, thank you for
Yeah.
doing that.
Yeah, and just to a little bit about my motivation around and how to think about solving this type 2 diabetes and obesity epidemic in the US and hopefully globally eventually. As I became obvious to me, I would say what's driving it, and it's primarily nutrition. Before even starting Virta, I wanted to solve it, and I was thinking carefully, taking a step back, like, okay, how do we solve this for not like for one person or 100, but for millions of people? Like, what is the solution? And
Mhm.
basically, where I landed was you need three things. You need to pull three levers very hard. One is awareness. Like literally, you go to a grocery store and you look at people's grocery carts. uh, Many people don't know that like drinking 2 liters or whatever that is, half a gallon or more than half a gallon of soda a day is not like nice to have. Like it's literally going to kill you. So one
Right.
is awareness. And I honestly,
Yeah.
most people still don't know what is healthy eating and what is like really bad. Like giving candy to children, it's a nice thing. I grew up, that's what my parents did, but it's toxic. It's literally killing you. But anyways, so one
Mhm.
is awareness. I still think food awareness and nutrition awareness, all you need to look at is the government, food guidelines. It's like eat cereals, some bagels, and orange juice and juice for breakfast. What is that? That is 100% sugar. That's
Mhm.
horrible. So one was awareness. Second one was policy. And I'm not a huge believer that the government's going to solve all our problems, but there are some policy decisions.
Mhm.
Things like what do we feed for our kids,
Mhm.
which I don't think is optimal today. So second
Yeah.
one was policy. And my quick conclusion was awareness and policy. I hope there's someone who's doing that. I have been an entrepreneur all my life, so I'm not going to spend the next decade in DC convincing politicians. I don't know how to do that. And
Mhm.
I can't do it, and I will go crazy if I try. So I sort of gave up personally the awareness and policy, and I've just tried to help others too. And then a third lever to pull to solve this problem on a massive scale, I thought, well, there's always an opportunity in a capitalistic society for new products and services. And that was kind of hence Virta. I said, well, I think we can build a company around here. And if we create an economic engine that feeds
Yeah.
itself, it is one of the most powerful forces in the world in a capitalistic system. So that's why I personally chose Virta as a for-profit company. And then having this kind of a business model where literally there's an entity who makes money when we reverse type 2 diabetes, and that is the insurance company or your self-insured employer. And so that was kind of the broad way in which I was looking at the tools. So policy,
Mhm.
awareness, and new products and services. And then we started Virta. And the so why did I want to start it? I was so mad that like your mom. Now I can't tell you what happened to her and people that I've seen around. Like people are suffering freaking needlessly. Like
Mhm.
800 people die a day from diabetes in America. A day. People lose eyes and limbs.
Yeah.
And many doctors don't know any better. They say, oh, it's a chronic and progressive disease. Okay, you're diagnosed. Now you're on insulin. I was so mad. And I was like, we have to try to affect change on like a millions of people level. And so that's kind of
Nice.
a little bit of the background context. And of course, sometimes from the nutrition community, I've heard like, oh, these guys are trying to profit off of a simple nutrition plan. I'm like, no, that's not the point. I have tweeted our simple nutrition plan many times, but we still have diabetes. Like if I had solved diabetes by tweeting that eat less sugar, I would have done that, but it doesn't work like that. Like you have to
Right.
work your ass off for many decades and have a model that
Yeah.
allows scaling and helping
Mhm.
millions of people. So that's kind of the driver,
Mhm.
at least for me personally, behind
Mhm.
behind the company.
Wow, thanks for sharing that. Um, Yeah, I think I am definitely gonna, let my, community know, like, "Do you guys know what they're doing over at Virta? Did you know that they already did that?" Like, like, in terms of, like, this kinda stuff is, like, I'd say things that are talked about in the holistic community a lot, but, like, no one's actually, like, doing it. I didn't know you guys were already, hitting it at that level, so it's appreciated. I'll send all sorts of people your way, because many of us have, like, little specialties. Like, yeah,
Mhm.
I can definitely help someone with that, but I also do mindset coaching is like the biggest part, and there's training,
Yeah,
and we do other things. And so it's like, I'm like, note to self, insulin resistance, like,
yeah,
especially if someone doesn't have a lot of money, check and
yeah.
see. And that's what I was wondering too. Like, suppose somebody didn't get the mailer or whatever, and they're curious. Can they see? How do they find out if
Yeah,
they're
just Google Virta Health. You'll find our
okay? You'll
website,
figure it out.
VIRTA, Google Virta Health, and you'll stumble on our website, and there's a
Hmm.
lots of YouTube videos, some blog posts, and our initial medical directors, Dr. Sarah Halberg, who was a PI, primary investigator in a clinical trial. She has a TEDx talk with more than 10 million
Mm.
views. So you can find a
Okay.
lot of materials about Virta online by just Googling, and then again, if your employer helpline covers, which hopefully is the case, then we can help for free.
Nice,
Yeah.
awesome. We'll link that up in the show notes, and also check out their Instagram, social media accounts too, because I noticed you guys share recipes and just all sorts of helpful info on there. So we'll link that up also. Yeah. Any last recommendations from your end of the health world changing pool?
Well, one thing I will say that for anyone who's on a journey towards better metabolic health, whether that's from sickness to health or health to wellness, one of the many things I've been very inspired by our patients is oftentimes if one family member joins Virta as a patient, there's a very positive ripple
Mm,
effect, not always, but most of the time, to their spouse. We've also had
right.
cases where we hear stories where the kids have started following a lot of the guidance and guidelines that we give to the parent, and the teenage kids
Right.
lose weight and go from being completely unable to even join athletics to thriving in soccer, and just heartwarming stories about parents telling who were the patients that they feel like they broken the generational curse in
Yeah.
obesity. And so I guess I would encourage anyone who is on a journey towards better metabolic health that um, speak to your people around you, obviously not in a kind of
Yeah.
preachy way, but
Right.
share like, hey, this is what I've done. Because that's one way that we can multiply positive impact from 1 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 8, and so forth. But
Mhm.
that's what I've noticed. And there's also no better proof point and billboard for success and outcomes than a person and seeing them. And like we
Yep.
hear this from primary care doctors that we can send them 500 pages of peer-reviewed outcomes from Virta, and it doesn't convince a PCP, primary care doctor, that diabetes is reversible or whatnot. But then they have one of the 2,000 patients in their panel who comes back and says, "Oh, I'm off of insulin, my blood sugar is down." And the primary care doctor is instantly convinced that there's a way to nutritionally reverse type
Yeah.
2 diabetes.
Yep.
So I guess that's one message I would say, the power of example. And if you found a way to get healthier, don't be quiet about it, because we need that. We need the
Mm.
150, soon 200 million American adults are
Yeah.
suffering from poor metabolic health. And it's a crisis, not just economic, but obviously too many human lives are ended way too short, quite frankly.
Mhm. Mhm. And a lot of suffering at the end on that road as
100%.
well.
100%.
Yeah, I mean, so well said. I've experienced firsthand, witnessed firsthand everything you're saying, a big hit on the non-preachy, it's like if you want to help your family, just help yourself. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to teach anything except when they start asking, just be excited about what you're
Yeah.
experiencing. Just shine that light, and that's it. And they'll be like that. People I noticed, tend to take the steps towards transformation when they're inspired more than when they're preached at. Preached at brings the ego out and
Yeah.
it's kind of like, I'm good the way I am. Inspired, it causes people to lean in. So yeah, be excited, share excitedly about what you're experiencing. I think it's the best help you can be to others. So yeah, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you so much. That was amazing. I'm so glad that on so many I'm so glad that I found out about this. I'm so glad that you guys are offering this. I will definitely be, encouraging people to find out if they qualify for Virta or even just pay for it out of pocket too. Like I'd say if type 2, if blood sugar, that type of metabolic dysfunction is your thing, like I'll definitely be sending a lot of people your way. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Hey, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Inside Out Health Podcast. I hope this episode served as inspiration and something that you needed to hear in your life. If you have a friend or family member that you think would benefit from this episode, please share it with them. And also, please subscribe. I have so many more amazing guests coming. I have just been so gifted and honored to meet so many incredible health professionals in my career, and I cannot wait to share their messages with you guys. So please subscribe. And if you could be so kind as to rate my show, I would really appreciate it. This podcast is honestly an intuitive call to me to help spread goodness to the world. And so if you guys can help me do that, I would really appreciate it. If you want more info on this guest, pop over to my website, check out my podcast section, and you can get links to everything we talked about in the show and find out more about this guest and where you can go from here. Make sure you're also following me on Instagram. That is my most active platform. You can find me at Coach Tara Garrison. You can also find me on YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter. Everything is Coach Tara Garrison across the board. And then, if you want to send me a message, guys, and let me know other guests or other topics you want to hear on the show, please let me know. I am here to serve you. So would love to hear from you, would love your feedback on the show. And if you share any of these episodes, please tag me on social media. It's Coach Tara Garrison.